So I'm really excited to be here this morning for any number of reasons. And I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning. I'm grateful to be a part of the program and was able to listen quietly to the panel that just left the stage and was happy to hear so many parallels in terms of approaches and strategies. And I hope to integrate some of what I heard in my remarks this morning. I hope, too, that you understand that I get the fact that after I have this discussion with you, there will be concluding remarks, which are very important, but it's sort of the only thing that keeps you from your very busy days. And I do recognize that. I was asked to share with you some of my experiences in my leadership journey. And I've worked under enormous pressure for a number of years and have done that with some relative coolness because it really is important for me not to expend all of my energy at one time. But the reason I can do that is because of the staff at the airport. I am here and can be here because they are not, and I recognize that. So with enormous respect for your cumulative experiences, my plan is to talk about the top 10 leadership learnings I've come to know over the years. And this dynamic program, I think, that intersperses is really important and so significant that we take time to come together today. And though I've been in public service now well over 30 years, I prefer to say well over 30 than more than 40, but I've been in, everything's relative, so I've been in public service more than 30 years. I consider myself still a learning leader. But when a topic comes up and people say, well, how do you describe yourself as a leader? Are you a democratic leader? Are you an authoritative leader? Are you a pace setter? What are you? And I say, yes, I am. So leadership, I think, is walked in different ways. And I'm absolutely, though, cemented to my non-negotiables. Those are absolutely solidly in place. And I know that your non-negotiables are as well. And I have to always be open and willing to learn and practice and perfect the art and smart of using and branding myself as one who is solidly in touch with those non-negotiables, but sufficiently flexible to adapt and address the ever-changing mission in front of our team. So in the operational environment, I consider myself a people-centered operations executive. Regularly, I put on a pair of blue gloves at the airport on a security checkpoint and work shoulder to shoulder with the officers, the supervisors, and the managers in a security screening protocol. They are an impressive, well-trained, very experienced cadre. A couple have some attitudes, we understand that, so it's really important to be a leader who's able to help folks adjust their attitude, as it were. So, but on their watch, please understand, and if you do the math, you will understand it even more. Every flight that has left that airport just on my watch, and I've been in the position now 10 and a half years, every single flight that's left that airport has what? Arrived at its destination safely, which is no small matter. If you do the math and multiply the number of days over this period of years times a domestic flight of about 200 seats or an international flight of about 500 seats, it is phenomenal what they have done across the enterprise since 2001, actually. So serving in an appointed position for so many years, and a majority of the years in my public service career has been very, very humbling. Humility is everything. It's helped me keep everything in perspective, and I hold very close my respect for the intricacies of the work and your missions and responsibilities and expectations attended to each of your AORs. As leaders in CDC, the IRS, HSI, BOP, the City of Atlanta, HUD, and all others represented here this morning, and those who wanted to be here and couldn't get here today. So understanding that not one person is indispensable, and even as just one speaker this morning operating within my sphere of experience, I know it is critical to be engaged, to be expert, to be appreciative, to be humble, and to be seated, and I intend to do that. Having one's ego in check is absolutely critical and very smart, too. In so many public service positions, there are repeat opportunities for one's humility to be constantly confirmed. That's a good and necessary thing. I was born Mary. I was not born Federal Security Director. The road leading to you this morning had me serve as a corrections professional for 30 years. I love saying that. I did 30 years inside. I just love saying that to people. Only that it's true. And better yet, I add that I met my husband in prison, which is really great. And speaking of prisons, and to the earlier point regarding humility, I want to share with you a story. Years ago, as a young corrections professional, I was serving as the executive assistant to the Commissioner of Corrections in the Commonwealth, where I was raised. So I was seated next to him at a Commonwealth-wide employee celebration. It was a very big deal, very big night. Though he likely thought I had not earned a place at the table next to him, clearly he needed me there at his beck and call. As he thought about his remarks to be made, he was still studying even while he was at that head table. And we were waiting to be served by the inmates from the culinary trades program at that particular institution. Man, that commissioner was feeling pretty proud of himself. You could almost see his chest just bursting. So it was hard to take. I never accepted it, but I did tolerate the fact that he had issues with his ego. In any case, being mighty proud, when he looked down from that head table, figuratively and literally, he looked down at the people who were gathered there that evening. After all, this was this annual celebration, and all of the food that was to be served was raised at the largest institution there in the Commonwealth. The steak, the potatoes, the vegetables that were provided were all raised in the programs, in the agriculture programs in the institutions. So the inmates appeared and began to serve the head table. And the commissioner received an inordinately large baked potato. I think that might have been planned. Call me crazy, but I think that was planned. And so then as the inmates came with the condiments, one of the young men dressed in his culinary whites placed a pat of butter on the plate for the commissioner to use, and he kept moving. So as he came back down the head table, the commissioner said, young man, he said, I'd like another pat of butter. And the inmate kept walking. And I thought, well, maybe he has a hearing deficiency. I don't know. This isn't good. In any case, when the inmate came back down the table, he cleared his throat again, and he said, I told you I'd like another pat of butter. So the inmate studied the commissioner as he looked down at him, and he finally said to the commissioner, one potato, one pat. So the commissioner further demanded his attention and said, do you know who I am? Do you have any idea who I am? And again, the inmate studied the commissioner. I was very quiet for a moment or two, and he said, no, I don't have any idea who you are, sir. He said, I'm the commissioner of corrections in this I am responsible for all of the prisons, all of the personnel and operations across this Commonwealth. And the inmate was quiet again. And he said to the commissioner, well, sir, do you know who I am? The commissioner said, no, I don't know who you are. He said, I'm the dude in charge of the butter. So, and that's a true story. So that's my first leadership learning, that humility is everything. As the Federal Security Director of the world's busiest airport and the other 7 federalized airports across the state of Georgia, trust me when I say I have learned so much more than I ever hoped to model for this workforce or the leadership team. There's no question that my service as a senior field executive has been buoyed by those 3 decades in corrections, where over that part of my career, I served as superintendent or warden of maximum security facilities and community-based correctional systems in Maryland, DC, Washington State, and Pennsylvania. So when my background investigation was conducted, there was some angst about why my home addresses had been co-located with prisons around the country. But I was able to explain that during one of the interviews and assuage that concern. And when I tell people I went from Penn State to the state pen, it's only that it's true that it happened that way. Those years gave rise to creating and honing and honoring the possibility of partnership over time, and certainly beyond the corrections profession. Those became keystones of how I came to recognize being connected to those whose work somehow connected to my own. So this raises another leadership learning. The incredible value of partnerships becomes a perpetual guiding principle, and we heard that from the panelists who just stepped down. And that still resides prominently on my list of leadership lessons over the years. So the last prison where I served as superintendent was situated in a city on an urban intersection, which is actually redundant. Existed on a city intersection. It's quite unusual for a maximum security prison. We tend to see them, those of us who look out for them, on country acreage, but away from cities typically. So the very sighting of that institution forced me to think differently about the relationship of that humongous structure right around the corner from long-standing neighborhoods, row homes, city hall, the police department, mom and pop corner stores, schools, and hospitals. And you bet I had to figure out how to become a good and yes, ultimately valued neighbor. That was no small feat, but it happened. And to that day, that institution is still connected with its immediate community. So the next leadership learning was to meet people where they are. Not one leader in that city was happy to watch this prison be constructed where neighborhoods once stood. The great power of government built over backyards and neighborhoods and front porches where generations of kids and grandkids have been raised and played. Believe me, it was more than a notion to become a good and trusted neighbor in that place. When the power of eminent domain reared its head, the agency bulldozed its way into that city's history and culture and took up too much space. As difficult as it was in that whole era, it left in its wake an opportunity to lead. So in the middle of madness, actually, there's great opportunity to lead. So I took the opportunity, include facilitating staff's understanding of the sensitivity and very high visibility of their uniforms and what that might represent to the city, and particularly when they were on their way in and would stop at a Quick Mart to grab a cup of coffee, what it meant when citizens of the city would see those officers. We had to be tempered yet unabashedly proud of our contribution to public safety, beginning in the city where we were situated. So that taught me to learn the external environment. And a friend would say, very, very vital. And when you have a rough patch, if the city or external partners or friends know you, they will step up and say, that's not the person I know, they just had a bad day. That doesn't define that administration. So leadership learning number 4, I did my best work for the institution by working outside of the institution, outside of my AOR. And I've got no trouble minding somebody else's business if I think somehow it's going to advance the mission. So when I worked concentric circles away from the prison, I was building and working on relationships. That whole situation seemed to me like a patchwork quilt. And we had our patches in that quilt. And part of that was a safety net that was created in terms of our relationship with the city. So it was the timing of a very significant tragedy that really, really brought us together in a way that became impenetrable. And that sad occurrence early on, after we opened the institution, there was a young police officer who was killed in a line of duty. He was raised in that city, and he was proud to serve and wear the uniform in that city. And as you can experience, have seen, or perhaps have walked in your own lives, there was a tremendous grief that washed over that small city. But the very next morning, having learned of the officer's untimely demise, I was among the first in line at the office of the chief of police. He and I had only met at a meeting. We didn't know each other well. But I felt obligated to be there to extend our condolences to the chief and to the mayor as a result of that tragedy. So I said to him, and I hadn't thought it through, and very frequently my staff will tell you I give voice to stuff that hasn't even gone through my head, but I hadn't thought it through. But I said to the chief, I said, you know, sir, you will have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, perhaps thousands of officers from all over the East Coast. So let me offer this to you. We take up about 4 blocks in this great city. The wall, the perimeter wall of that institution. The sidewalk and the curb belongs to the institution. So because there will be a challenge, why don't you invite officers coming into the city to park their cruisers along that wall? First of all, it's accessible, and just by saying so, I can make that happen. We have a great camera system, so all of the cruisers and the equipment will be safe. In addition, because we prepare about 3,000 meals a day, I want to offer to you the opportunity to have the officers fed in the institution. The inmates will be glad to do that, and obviously they are very well supervised. So it's no surprise to you, I know, that it was an unusual invitation to a police officer to have a meal inside of an institution. But again, it was a way for us to extend our condolences and show our support to the city in a way that I think no other facility could have. We were always kicking out 3,000 meals a day, so it didn't mean anything except it meant everything to them to prepare additional meals to make sure those officers had nutrition over a tough couple of days. So he accepted the offer. What a day that was. What a couple of days it was, actually. So when it was over and the officers were leaving the city and returning to their varied jurisdictions, inmates approached me and wanted to know, so Superintendent, the next time, I said, okay, so let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about the opportunity to stay connected to this city. You all were not born here. You are here, and you need to be here, apparently. But you were not born here, so staying connected to the community in a way that's safe and makes sense is a great thing. So let's not think about that next time, right, in those terms. Let's just think about the possibilities and that you, too, are part of the architectural team here. So they would go away and come back, and he'd say, okay, so how am I part of an architectural team? Not quite the question the way it was presented to me, but whatever. So I said, what you're doing is building a bridge to this community, and so symbolically, you are building a bridge to your own home communities. Again, you weren't born here, but you are here for a long enough period of time, most of you, that you ought to, I think about that. So that leadership learning for me was a leader is bound to do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And I thought that was the right thing to do. I didn't know if the chief would accept that offer, but he did. That absolutely cemented our relationship. I wanted nothing back from that city or that administration except to know that you've got some friends inside and we can help you make some things happen. So the ways of leadership, and particularly in places with an atypical, complicated mission, exist around similar objectives, be it the U.S. Census, the Corps of Engineers, the city of Lovejoy, or Roswell, or Georgia State. I would offer have fewer dissimilarities than there are similarities. There are so many parallels in the mission of these agencies. Indeed, we know the world seems to be shrinking so much. So we're all somehow connected, I think, with fewer and fewer degrees of separation. You all lead, and we are all leading in critical times, such as the days being faced by our country. And from each of our professional vantage points, no matter the line of business, at the end of the day, in more ways than one, it is about protecting the public by one measure or another. It is about how we engage with staff and with each other, how we co-create annual performance plans and objectives that challenge, fulfill, and well serve the people's business. In any case, as someone had said to me years ago that I would be embedded with a workforce of more than 1,000 whose very training and application and preparation and responsibility would be directly and unquestionably the reason that flights would stay in the air. I would have said to them, you must be out of your ever-loving mind. Depending on my relationship, I may have said that. And even still, sometimes I marvel at the mission by the numbers for which this team is responsible. 1,700 TSA staff among the 63,000 airport employees there at Hartsfield-Jackson. 110 million passengers in the airport every year. about 265,000 passengers in the airport every single day. They are departing and arriving from 237 domestic and international gates to destinations across the globe. And the airport is within 2 hours of 80% of the nation's population, which in and of itself is a magnet for the enemy, whose nefarious intent still is focusing on aviation. But this entire operation is orchestrated and moves under the attentive and watchful eye of the 398-foot tower, which is the tallest in North America. There are, on average, 70,000 prohibited items intercepted over a year, including guns, some loaded, some chambered, knives, tasers, grenades, credit card knives, and remarkably, a couple days ago, a suicide vest was packed in a person's bag. And last week, there was a 5-foot snake that surprised the officer when she opened it in the bag room. But still, my favorite is the nail-studded bat that we found in a person's carry-on bag. Now, I understand the middle seat can be difficult. But I'm thinking that nail-studded bat was just something no one needed on a flight, be it an hour or 3 hours. So the privilege of leading this team of 1,700 transportation security officers, who are the most visible of TSA staff across the world, but also the team includes regulatory and compliance inspectors, K-9 team handlers, security managers, explosives and ordnance specialists, law enforcement assistant directors, intel officers, certified trainers, fiscal folks, customer service managers, and it goes on. And importantly, as I was once one of these as a young woman, our executive assistants who keep us on track. Greg is busy right now, I can feel it. And Greg being busy helps me be here this morning. I so appreciate the work that he does for me. I thank the Creator for our executive assistant. So that leads to another leadership learning, recognizing that the higher one ascends on the ladder, the more exposed one's posterior becomes. So it's important never to look down at the person on the rung beneath you. I get the fact that I can be here, and I'm wise enough to understand that my sitting at the head of a conference table is not what makes me a leader, any more than DMV issuing driver's licenses makes people good drivers. All of those staff are a part of the team securing the skies and keeping people and cargo aloft at 40,000 feet, 365, 24/7. So when my nephew and I used to hang out on weekends, when he was much, much younger, he would say, "Aunt Jen, are you working today?" And I go, "Shh, you hear a plane, Clifton?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm working." Clifton, amazing now, is a captain for a major cargo carrier, and he flies through Atlanta often. And so it goes. I am never, ever unaware of my surroundings and the weight and the expectations that this position carries. In the middle of it all, we experience the most important constant, and that is the appreciation of reaching across agency boundaries and mandates, again, as discussed by our panel, to work in collaboration with partners who are closer than we might think. Learning for years, I have modeled and emphasized the mantra, as Kim talked about, to prepare for war in times of peace. When I need support or expertise, it does me little good and in fact completely gets in the way of moving forward when the issue with which I am dealing and confronting could surely be about life and limb. It does very little good to try to explain to a colleague at 3 o'clock in the morning who I am, what I do, and what is needed when I'm feverishly working to get a timely, well-coordinated, collaborative response to an emergency. At 3 in the morning, there's no time to explain. There's no time to remind. You remember, we met at an emergency preparedness training. You remember me, right? That's not going to work. Who I know I can call at 3 in the afternoon is absolutely important. But it is who I can call at 3 in the morning and he or she says, "What do you need, Mary?" That's the importance of those relationships. 3 in the afternoon, not a problem. 3 in the morning, that's the real deal. So this is what strengthens partnerships, which is at essence a millennium word for relationships. Again, we heard that from the panel. And I will always say that is exactly what makes the difference. To prepare for war in times of peace, then, is my leadership learning. Number 8. Similarly, when a colleague needs me or our team to assist in a response, he or she knows we are just a call away, be it noon or dark 30. We don't need to add any more energy and frenetic pace to know who to reach out to. We need to know that at the start of every day. I'm talking about a colleague who could not only stop, but will stop critical work and extend him or herself to help out, even as the whole world is watching. A few examples of partnership and collaboration that provide a real difference in the aviation security environment, for example, is to be effectively engaged. I said infectively, which is really ironic because what I want to talk about is our relationship with Customs and Border Protection there at the airport and in the field, which, as you know, has had a particularly critical role relative to the Ebola crisis when we were facing that. And my, doesn't that seem like some sort of history now when we think about the EMTs on specialized medical transport, the opportunity and need to engage with labor organizations and local hospitals, replete with working on behalf of our workforce and their labor representatives to ensure that important information and need to know information was being provided to all of our staff. Driven but conscious of the need of others, we entered dealing with that challenge as a continuation of our pre-existing relationships, AKA collaboration. And amazingly, we are today, as you know, facing the very similar challenge of being a support to our partners, and particularly with the Centers for Disease Control and Customs and Border Protection as a result of COVID-19, commonly known as coronavirus. In these respectfully cultivated relationships, our workforce has the opportunity to witness the building and tending to partner collaboration, leading to staff building their own connections at all levels in our organizations. Oh, for sure, the fact that directors know each other, that's a great thing. Special agents and chiefs and deputies are engaged with each other at meetings and those kinds of things. But it is when the frontline and middle managers are connected to each other across agencies. I think that's where the real strength is. The deeper and sustaining value is really when leadership teams are in synergy at all levels, which is something for which I advocate and champion as long as there are opportunities to do so, or I just create that opportunity. The strength of that multi-layered safety net that I talked about earlier simply cannot be unrecognized nor overrated. It is everything. This is so much the connective tissue that keeps the entire body healthy. These partnerships that stand the test of time are forever joined in a way that is not negatively influenced and not moved by time passing. And in fact, we see now a generation of aviation security professionals who are rooted in a 2001 stand-up of the agency. They are included in that circle of managing, for sure, but also leading. The potential for unanticipated challenge and crisis is ever present. It's always lurking in the wings, no pun intended. A prominent experience is a completely unanticipated opportunity that came with leading that workforce on the heels of the 35-day government hiatus. When I think about it, again, it seems so long ago, but it is so rooted right here. It's absolutely amazing. So we came out of that 35-day shutdown just 7 days before the kickoff of Super Bowl 53. So on January 25th, when I realized I was alive again and got out of the bed, my husband said to me on my birthday, January 25th, "Sweetheart, are you sure you don't want anything for your birthday?" I said, "All I want is for this to be over." About 1 o'clock that afternoon, it was over. And when I tell you, the administrative team, the executive team almost tipped the table when we jumped up in the conference room, I'm telling you the truth. That Super Bowl was more than a notion in terms of rallying officers to stay focused and not be distracted by empty bellies and trying to make the decision as to whether they were going to pack their lunch or pack their kids' lunch. That was a culmination of an incredible experience. This was a SEER 1 event, which is a special event assessment rating that is applied by the federal government to any major event in the country. So to be responsible, as was this team, for that SEER 1 event, and to look at the depleted staff in terms of their emotion and their concern, rally to make that happen. And they screened 104,000 passengers on that day with not one security incident. It's amazing what they did. They made it happen. It is incredible to me still that the collaboration around this event was absolutely legendary, beyond anything I've experienced across my career. And it was really the reinforcement of our having these relationships for years in that airport. So the officers rallied. They came out of that financial toll and emotional toll. And as a leader, I had to reach for everything in me to lead the troops through the most challenging periods of our work together, this most challenging period of our work together. So I think that insightful, dynamic leadership by my leadership team in crisis while under pressure is the watchword. Effective leadership against tremendous odds, thoughtful, mindful leadership in the face of a not infrequently unforgiving, always demanding external environment. I'm gratified to say with authenticity that we are operating at a level of mutuality that I believe is exactly what our partners would report. We're actively engaged with the Atlanta Police Department, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Secret Service, Customs, colleges and universities, the Shepherd Center, the Marcus Autism Center, to help us be more sensitive and read and support differently patients who are now passengers in front of us as they leave those great facilities. The Federal Executive Board, certainly, the interagency intel working groups, all of those alphabet agencies. Marta called me this morning and asked me a very important question. Apparently, they thought I was a lot more intelligent than I am. So I referred the question to the expert at the airport. But these are the kinds of relationships, again, that keep that safety net really healthy under that airport environment. And because sometimes, just as with prisons, I think I do my best work for the airport, working away from the airport, I know that it is this network, well-honed and well-used, that provides the basis for the strong conduct of public safety, for maturing partnerships. So instead of operating with competing authorities and funding streams in areas of ownership, we do well to turn this approach by moving from transactional to transformational partnerships. What I know is TSA Georgia is sure-footed and steadfast. Lesson number 9, never be confused, deterred, nor puzzled about translating instincts into positive action and realistic responsive public policy, facing the work and challenges encountered every day. So to avoid getting the hook, let me try to summarize the collaborative culture through which we manage and lead the workforce, and understanding that I should have said to you at the top what Elizabeth Taylor may have said to a couple of her husbands, bless her soul. Don't worry, I won't keep you long. I should have told you that. So let me try to summarize. To cultivate trust, not by what I say, but by what I'm seen doing. To demonstrably integrate collaboration and workflow and benchmarks. To work along with staff to determine and make clear organizational non-negotiables, even as they work perhaps on their personal non-negotiables. Define and walk the watchwords expressed to staff. In other words, I have to figure out a way to say things in public that I'm minting in private and push it through the sieve of authenticity and transparency, but also at the end of the day, be able to maintain our mortgage. It's very important. There's an art to that, to be transparent, to be detailed to staff, to respect folks in their positions, to say, you need to know this, but the rest of the this is sieved through. I absorb that. I don't pass all of it on. Be sure it's clear to staff that the goal is not to just get to the table, but once you get to the table, you have to serve at the table. It isn't enough just to be there. I once read that if you're called to be a servant, why would you stoop to be a king? So when you come to the table, make sure that you're serving at the table. And though it's not quantifiable, there is no question that experience teaches. When we are born, we look like our parents, but much later in life, we look like our decisions. Let clarity of purpose speak. Observers watch not only what we do, but importantly, who we bring with us in leadership. So, lesson number 10, everything we count doesn't count, and often what counts isn't counted. In closing, I ask that we all keep a covenant to utilize our places at the table in a very active, representative way. So there were two nuns standing on the side of a wide body of water. It was white water. It was coursing, and it was loud. It was ferocious in its current. So one of the nuns was a more mature nun. She was probably my age. She was a very mature nun. And there was a younger nun next to her who was very anxious to get across the water. And she said, "Sister, we got to go. Come on, you're wasting your time. Why are you just standing there?" And the older nun said to her, "Let's check this out. Let's just figure out how we're going to." "No, sister, I'm going." She said, "Bless you, child, if you must, but I think we should look at this." No, sister, I'm going." So there goes a younger nun across the water. She's tossed and turned. She's drenched. She almost drowned. She's exhausted when she crawls up on the other side of the water. And she is shocked to see the older nun standing there, quite calm, and only the hem of her garment is wet. Otherwise, she's in the same shape as on the other side of the water. And the younger sister said, how'd you get here? Look at me. How did you get over here?" And the older nun said, "Sister, I know where the rocks are. I know how to walk across this water." So in order to be authentic as leaders, we have to not only know the way, but show the way. If you think that I sound like I know what I'm doing, I do. And I should, after all of these years. But believe me when I tell you, I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I can see further as a result of standing on their shoulders. So in closing, I thank you for your interest, your excellence, and your ethics, and your energy. Thank you for remembering those who aspire to places of greater responsibility. They're inspired because of you, because you have no intention of simply having held a position, but you have decided to serve as a model in fields that enormously benefit and will into decades benefit the community as a result of your experience and selflessness, on balance, of course, with your brilliant achievements. And as for me, as long as I remain in public service, I will encourage and enable others when and where I can, never forgetting the men and women who have done the same for me. I often just have to smile and be grateful always for the gifts intermingled with the many, many challenges we face, to include the gift of being with you this morning. Thank you so much.